Welcome to the Lynn Community Television Show, a program which focuses on organizations to work and make their impact right here in the city of Lynn. And we've got a great show for you today. We'll be focusing on the ballot questions. The specific ballot question that we'll be focusing on is question 3, and that question is condition for farm animals. What we'll be doing is we'll be presenting both sides of the argument. But this program, we are featuring Diane Sullivan, and Diane is the campaign manager for Citizens Against Food, Tax, and Justice, and we're going to allow her to explain who she is and how she's involved. Diane, thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much. So I am the campaign manager for Citizens Against Food, Tax, and Justice. I've been doing anti-poverty work for the past 14 years, and that was born out of my own experience with poverty, hunger, and homelessness. And I see question 3 actually as a social injustice that's going to cause harm to low and middle income families and residents here in the Commonwealth.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming onto the program. As you know, and I'll offer this insight to our viewership, is this program is going to be broken up into 2 15-minute segments. We've allocated 15 minutes for each of these segments, and in that 15 minutes what we'll do is we'll allow these guys to take 7 minutes of our time to explain and present their argument and the benefits of a yes or no vote, depending on what side of the argument that they're on. What we've done here at LCTV are reached out to the authors of these arguments, which you can find in the 2016 voter information booklet, and in that booklet you'll find some detail about the questions that will be on the ballot. This is a booklet that's issued by the Secretary of the Commonwealth, Bill Galvin, being our Secretary of the Commonwealth. And what we're going to do right now is just review the yes and no results for question 3. So question 3, condition for farm animals, what your vote will do. As required by law, the statements describing the effect of a yes or no vote are written jointly by the State Attorney General and the Secretary of the Commonwealth. A yes vote for question 3, condition for farm animals, would prohibit any confinement of pigs, calves, and hens that prevent them from lying down, standing up, fully extending their limbs, or turning around freely. A no vote would make no change in current laws relative to the keeping of farm animals. So before we get into our 7-minute segment where you present your argument and you explain the benefits of a no vote, I'd love for you to be able to afford our viewership with some insight on how these questions actually end up on the ballot.
Sure. Well, it's essentially a signature gathering campaign. And what's interesting, particularly about question 3, as you just read, it mentions conditions for farm animals, and it doesn't get into the economic impact. So the proponents of question 3, they maybe had a really easy time going out to ask voters to sign this petition because it essentially asks, do you want to prevent cruelty to animals? And naturally, we want to say yes. It feels counterintuitive to say no to that question. So I've had 2 conversations specifically with folks who remember signing that petition to get question 3 on the ballot, and once they understood what the actual impacts of question 3 will be, they regret signing that petition and plan to vote no on 3.
All right. So here we are. You were called up as a person on the against side. So the proponents are the people who make the effort to get this on the ballot, and then any parties that want to oppose this, they have an opportunity to also collect signatures, and that's why you're here today.
Right. So I recently stood up a committee to oppose question 3 on the ballot, and as I mentioned earlier, I look at question 3 as a social injustice that's going to essentially cost them Massachusetts consumers $250 million in the first year of implementation as a new regressive food tax. So, while I have an uphill battle certainly at hand, largely in part due to how the question is designed, I feel compelled to be part of this discussion and to represent low and middle income consumers here in Massachusetts who often aren't part of these policy debates.
Wonderful. So let's move into our next segment. You've got 7 minutes to present your argument and explain the benefits of a no vote. If you finish under 7 minutes, I'll always give you some time to finish your time. I'll say something like, you've still got 2 more minutes, you can continue. So we're going to start that 7-minute segment right now. Present your argument and explain the benefits of a no vote.
Okay, great. So as I said, this would be a $250 million new regressive food tax here in Massachusetts. And to put that into perspective, and the community of Lynn certainly understands the housing crisis that's happening here in Massachusetts. And a $250 million would essentially be Massachusetts consumers losing affordable choice. We're talking about, this has been put under the umbrella of the cage-free egg debate to sort of put it into perspective in how it's been portrayed. And we would be removing affordable choices right off of the shelves of our grocery stores. And we're talking about, the eggs that we can often find for 99 cents or $1.19. And so this $250 million would actually be going largely to out-of-state producers to subsidize housing for their livestock. And I can only imagine, I know that the great work that the Lynn Shelter Association does, the Lynn Housing Authority, if they had a portion of that $250 million to implement some good work on the housing front here for people, I think that that might be the priority that Massachusetts and certainly the residents of Lynn would want to take. My opponents, they say that this is a modest measure, and in fact, that's true. In fact, it's so modest that it would only impact one farm here in Massachusetts. You mentioned the three livestock, the three animals that it would impact. In fact, two of those animals we do not even raise here in Massachusetts in the fashion in which they're trying to ban. There is one farm in western Massachusetts where 3,000 hens, egg-laying hens, are housed, one per cage, not crowded into cages as my proponents will want your viewers to believe, and they have the space to stand up, sit down, and turn around. And in fact, they're not crowding each other out for food, which is a natural behavior of hens. They are not pecking at each other. They are not cannibalizing one another, which is unfortunately one of these trade-offs. So yes, would these hens have a little bit more space? Yes, they would, but there are trade-offs. And when we talk about trade-offs, low-income families know what trade-offs look like for us. I've been in that situation myself where I've been a recipient of SNAP benefits, the federal program that helps families feed themselves. And when my SNAP benefits have run out for the month, my paycheck was still a couple of days away. I've been able to gather up $1 and change, and I've done this on many, many occasions, and go to the grocery store, purchase a dozen eggs, and be able to feed my children dinner, some sort of protein. And so to remove that affordable choice from families like mine, from the thousands, there are almost 800,000 families here in Massachusetts who rely on SNAP benefits. And we know that only scratches the surface of what actual food insecurity looks like here in Massachusetts. We know that there are hundreds of thousands more who are actually eligible for the SNAP program, but for whatever reason, they're not gaining access. And so we have to talk about what the harm to people here in Massachusetts would be if we were to pass question 3. Now, my opponents will also talk about food safety. And I just before coming here, read a story from the New York Times where a video came out of a cage-free egg facility where there were rotting chickens, rotting hens. There was one hen whose head was missing. Again, these are hens displaying their natural behavior. And so I think it's important to note that my opponents are really playing on the emotions of the Massachusetts consumers. My opponents have called me a pawn for big agriculture, and I assure your viewers I am not. I've been doing this work for many, many years, and my personal experience with poverty and my professional experience in policy have taught me that when we start to solve for a problem that doesn't exist, poor people are often harmed. And we can look to California. California right now is the only state in the country that bans the sale of eggs that come from caged hens. And my opponents ignore the headlines. I'll just read a couple for you. Egg market disrupted in U.S. as cages made roomier. California scrambled eggs, the state's new chicken coop law, is hitting human beings hard. Shortage of legally compliant shell eggs sends prices soaring in California, $6 per dozen at San Francisco Safeway. And this is what we have on our horizon. And what's interesting is that California is actually much more self-sufficient when it comes to feeding themselves. They produce 50% of their own eggs and import 50%. We import 98% of the eggs that we consume here in Massachusetts. And what I want your viewers, the Massachusetts voters to understand is that what we have here is a DC special interest group that is here in our backyard trying to dictate how, first of all, farmers here in Massachusetts farm. And it's important to note that question 3 is opposed by the Massachusetts Farm Bureau Federation with its 6,000 members. They understand the trade-offs for hens, and they certainly acknowledge the economic impact. And my opponents will say that, oh, the market is moving this way, we're trending this way. Well, you know, what's interesting is that you can go into your local grocery store, and I encourage your viewers to do this, to go into their local grocery store and look at the cost difference. Look at the cheapest dozen conventional eggs and the cheapest dozen cage-free eggs. And you'll see that the conventional eggs are far more cheaper. Cage-free eggs, 2, I've seen 3, seen 4 times more expensive than what a conventional egg costs. And that's already happening here in Massachusetts, where our living expenses are 30% higher than in the rest of the country. The last thing that we need here in Massachusetts is a regressive food tax that is going to hurt people by sending $250 million out to these out-of-state producers for them to subsidize housing for their livestock. That money would be far better spent here in Massachusetts, subsidizing housing perhaps for our suffering neighbors.
30 seconds.
Okay, thank you. So I also, my opponents will talk about who is funding me, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Forrest Lucas. And I assure you, you know, this man, he grew up poor on a ranch. He understands struggle, and he certainly knows how to care for animals. He has we share a genuine concern for our growing population and our ability to feed ourselves, and he's providing me the opportunity to sit here and be part of this debate on food policy.
All right. So we're going to move into our next segment, which is your 1-minute closing. You'll have 60 seconds to close, and you can make any defining arguments that you want to. So 1 minute to close, starting now.
Okay, so question 3, again, I have to keep repeating this, is a regressive food tax that is going to cause harm to Massachusetts residents. We have families right now who are making the decisions between feeding their children and paying their rent. And these are the realities. Many people here, right here in Lynn, across the state of Massachusetts, are living on a $2 a day budget. And I understand that some elite group from DC doesn't understand what that struggle looks like for people here in Massachusetts, but the Massachusetts voters certainly know. They've called me a pawn for big agriculture. I certainly am not. Let's not have the Massachusetts voters be the pawn for a special DC interest group who is here to steal away the affordable choices. 90% of us buy conventional eggs. We're not. If you want to go buy a cage-free egg and you have the means to pay for that, then nobody's trying to mess with that option that you have available to you. Please leave the affordable choices that we have for families here in Massachusetts alone. If they're concerned about how farmers in other states are farming, let them go to those other states and deal with it there. We shouldn't be held responsible for bankrolling cage-free production across the rest of the country. We're struggling to pay our own rent here.
I want to say thank you to my guests, and I want to wish them the best of luck in November. We're going to be right back after this break with the other side of the argument. Stay tuned. But I want to take some time to introduce my guest, Kimberly Barzola. Kimberly is the campaign community organizer for Citizens for Farm Animal Protection, and she's going to offer us some insight as to who she is and what she does. Kimberly, thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on the show. So as a campaign community organizer, what I'm looking to do is inform Massachusetts voters why you should choose a yes vote for question 3 that will be on the ballot this November. And what it really comes down to a modest measure that will improve the lives of animals by allowing them to sit up, lie down, turn around, and extend their limbs, as well as provide better food safety standards for Massachusetts families.
Great. So this is something that not a lot of people are aware of. You know, not a lot of Americans understand where their agriculture comes from, how it's produced. So this is a pretty interesting question that pops up and allows people to kind of go out and research it a little bit further. I want to take some time right now to kind of explain to our viewership what a yes vote will get you and what a no vote will get you. So in regard to question 3, condition for farm animals, what your vote will do. As required by law, the statements describing the effects of a yes or no vote are written jointly by the State Attorney General and the Secretary of the Commonwealth. So, a yes vote on question 3, conditions for farm animals, would prohibit any confinement of pigs, calves, and hens that prevent them from lying down, standing up, fully extending their limbs, or turning around freely. A no vote on question 3, conditions for farm animals, would make no change in the current laws relative to the keeping of farm animals. So what we've done is we've taken the opportunity to reach out to each of the authors of the arguments, which you can find in your 2016 Information for Voters. It's a booklet that's issued by the Secretary of the Commonwealth, Bill Galvin's office. You can pick it up at your local library. Most times at City Hall, they'll have them available for you. So we reached out to the organizers behind these arguments, and we worked to get proponents, or really proponents for their arguments, come onto the program and afford our viewership with some insight in regard to why they believe the vote should go in the direction that they're pushing for. So we want to give Kimberly an opportunity to kind of explain to us her perspective. So Kimberly's going to have 7 minutes to present her argument and explain the benefits of a yes vote, because she's in favor. So we'll start the clock now. I'm not sure if actually, I'd like to just kind of spin this off before we get into it. These ballot questions, right? I think it's important for our viewership to kind of understand how they end up on the ballot. I know there's a lot of signatures that have to be done. Can you afford us with some insight on that?
Sure thing. So in order to get a ballot initiative on the actual ballot, there's a series of petition gathering and signature gathering that has to happen way in advance. So the people that have been working towards getting these questions on the ballot have been working for over a year at this point. And so actually question 3 was the only question out of all the questions to come on the ballot without a paid signature firm, and that was due to our overwhelming support from volunteers from Massachusetts who took it upon themselves to go and speak to Massachusetts voters, and ultimately we were able to gather over 170,000 signatures.
All right. So a lot of legwork that has to go into this thing. It really is the will of the people. It's kind of a way to kind of bypass the whole judicial system and the checks and balances. So if there are enough people who want this in favor for, and then there are enough people who are kind of against it, then ends up on the ballot. So that's why we're here today discussing the question. So I'm going to kick it over to Kimberly and give her an opportunity to present her argument and explain the benefits of a yes vote on question 3, conditions for farm animals. Kimberly, you start now.
Great. So like I mentioned earlier, really what this question boils down to is a modest measure to just codify standards for farm animals, and specifically for any products coming from farm animals in these extremely small confinement systems that currently exist in Massachusetts. So this question, and specifically, is targeting chickens in battery cages, gestating sows, so pigs when they are pregnant and gestating, and also veals in veal crates. And these confinement systems have shown in numerous studies the effects of having higher increases of rates of salmonella, which is the most common foodborne pathogen. And so really this is also a question about food safety for Massachusetts families. But ultimately, we believe that these animals deserve more humane treatment than they're currently receiving, and this will benefit Massachusetts consumers and the animals themselves.
All right. So short and sweet. We're about 1 minute into your 7-minute segments. You've got plenty of time to really explain and kind of speak openly about your argument, why people should vote in favor for question 3, or we could just kick it into your closing if...
Sure, I could talk a little more. So something that's come up a few times is about some claims about the price. So our opponents have said that the price will skyrocket, and referencing studies that have not actually been published. So what we're using in terms of an economic look at the impact this will have on Massachusetts consumers is studies that have been shown and that have been produced by the egg industry themselves. This is not paid for by our campaign, and we're not associated with it, but it's coming from the egg industry themselves, and they have told us that the price of eggs will just maybe increase by 1 or 2 pennies. And the fact that this is happening in Massachusetts is just a result of a national trend towards cage-free eggs. So there have been roughly 10 states that have also enacted similar bills or pieces of legislation to what we're seeing in Massachusetts this November. But we also have large, cost-conscious companies such as Walmart, McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts that have all pledged to go 100% cage-free. And even McDonald's, one of the most cost-conscious companies that we see today, they have told and pledged that they will not raise the price of any products, not even by 1 penny. So ultimately, what we're seeing is just a greater standard for food in Massachusetts for Massachusetts families. And that is what we're looking to promote, because this question is by Massachusetts voters. And we've seen an overwhelming support by Massachusetts voters already. In the polls that have been shown, question 3, a yes vote, has been supported by the largest margin. Over 66% of voters have already said that they would support a yes vote on question 3. So we're seeing a lot of momentum through our volunteers, but also in these polls. And we're really excited that we're also working with a large coalition of community organizations, as well as the Humane Society of the United States, the MSPCA, the Massachusetts Sierra Club, the Center for Consumer Federation of America, and countless other groups that have also seen the benefits, including recently actually a Boston Globe editorial that has also pointed to the benefits of question 3, a yes vote on question 3, and highlights that so the cost increase will be roughly less than a movie ticket per year. So really the cost increase is not going to be significant and will not skyrocket as our opponents have claimed.
All right. So we're about, we got about 3 minutes left, maybe just about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. We can move on to your closing, but I think this would be a good time for you to kind of explain the logistics of the bill, when it would come into effect and all that stuff to kind of afford that insight.
Sure thing. So unlike the other questions, question 3 and the kind of enactment period would happen over a kind of longer, relatively longer period of time. So this bill, if it's passed, or the ballot question, if it's passed, won't have to be fully enforced until 2022. So that gives producers, and really just one farm in Massachusetts, time to transition towards these new standards and new confinement systems that allow animals to have more room than what they're currently allotted, which is roughly, so for chickens, it's the size of an iPad. So if you imagine that, it's just really small, inhumane. These animals cannot sit down, lie up, turn around, or extend their limbs. So we are also giving these producers time to transition into these more humane raising and breeding facilities.
All right, great. So sounds like we're pretty much done with our first 7-minute segment. We can move into our 1-minute closing, and you can start now.
Sure thing. So we're really hoping that Massachusetts voters, as they've shown in the polls already, and also through our really strong support from our volunteer base, that you will support a yes vote on question 3, not only for the animals who deserve to sit down and extend their limbs and move around, but also for Massachusetts families who will greatly benefit from increased food standards. If you want any more information on any of what I spoke today, please feel free to visit our website, yeson3.com. We have resources about each of the points I talked about, as well as a full list of endorsements. You can see that we've been endorsed by over 100 Massachusetts farmers, veterinarians, and small businesses who see that this is the direction of animal welfare and consumer safety for Massachusetts families. So yeah, yes on 3, a yes vote. Question 3.
Kimberly Barzola, the campaign community organizer for Citizens for Farm Animal Protection. I want to say thank you to my guests, and I want to say good luck to both of our guests for coming on to the program. Good luck in November. Make sure you get out there and vote, review these ballot questions, guys, so that you know you're up against and we know what side we're taking. I want to say thank you again to our guests, and I want to say thank you to our staff as well. That's it for the Lynn Community Television Show from the studios here at LCTV. I'm Sean Donahue, wishing you all the best.